a little bit of and a little bit of
so that I don't forget it. There we go. Okay. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself when this starts? I'm thinking, I know we have already introduced ourselves, but just to remind people.
Oh yeah, I'll just give them a quick 5-second introduction.
Yeah.
Not too long.
Yeah. Well, I think it's nice for them to know that we're all very qualified people, and
Yeah.
hopefully they know that by now. Although I think it was me in the very first class. I gave a wrong, yeah. I gave a, maybe not, yes, a wrong answer. You lined me out. I was like, what was the name of that? Welding fume. So we have to watch each other. Keep us all on the straight and narrow. There we go, 24.
24.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good,
Good
actually.
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon too.
Hey, Gideon.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Thank you. You know, it's so nice to see everyone's face. I understand about you know, bandwidth and connectivity, but you know, if you ever want to come off your or stop your I don't mean to say stop, to join
to go
us,
on the video.
start your video. Yes, start your video. We would be very glad. We're glad you're here anyway, but it helps make a connection. So good morning, good afternoon, Esther.
25.
Yeah.
Malachi.
Yeah. So what do you think? Shall we make a start?
Sure, we have 25. That's fantastic.
It's actually 26 because 2 are the same place.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, fantastic. It's all yours, Dave, whenever you want to start.
Okay, do you want to start recording?
I did.
Oh, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it is too. Okay, recording started. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just see the icon there. Yes. Hello, everybody. Good to see and hear you all again for this tutorial. For those who wonder who I am, and even though the name is there, Dave Rogers, I'm an occupational hygienist since 1986, and have worked on, and I'm a consultant since 1990, and I've worked in many different industries and problems in workplaces over the years, and some of those will be reflected today in our call. Today we're going to look at ventilation, asbestos, biological hazards, and noise. The biological hazards section will be done by Lindo. Yeah, he's nodding. So that's good. It's always good to know. And so, I mean, the format for the I should remind you, for the next 2 sessions will start 2 hours earlier at 1 p.m. Ghana time, and that's to accommodate Ramadan aspects, and so they will run from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. in Ghana on the 25th of March and the 1st of April. Okay, what I'll do now is I will start the ventilation section. The way my sections will run, I'm going to go through a few slides to give you a reminder of what hopefully you've already read in the manual, And I know some of you have already asked me some questions about what you've read, and that's really great. We will also then break into breakout rooms to look at the case studies, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at those case studies. And if you haven't, we'll flash them up anyway, and you can look at those. And towards the end, towards the end of the session, we'll have a very short 3 questions. What do you think the answer is? And that will take us to the end of the session. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen, and I'm going to start with ventilation. And I think that's the one I need to share. Looks like it. I have 11 windows open for this, so hopefully this is screen 1, and that's now showing. Can you see my screen all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I will put that into presentation mode. Come on, there we are. Okay, you should also be able to see the words 10 ventilation.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, this is just going to be a short run through of what was in the manual and picking out some of the highlights. So first of all, the manual discusses 2 types of ventilation systems. And the first one is dilution ventilation. And this is where it's often called general ventilation as well. It's where you have, for example, you might rely on opening windows, opening a large roller door, blowing air around with a large fan in a building, in a room, that sort of thing. And the idea is that you are reducing the background concentration by adding fresh, uncontaminated air into the space. And what will happen is that it's if you have a very low toxic substance, small amounts of that, it will become widely dispersed across all of the area and hopefully diluted in terms of concentration, but it's not actually removed from the place. The next type of one you could have is the local exhaust ventilation systems, and they are much more effective, and they are systems which are designed to remove the contamination or contaminants that you have, whether it be dusts or vapors or other gases. They're designed to remove them as close to the generation of those gases, vapors, and dusts as possible, also known as the source of the contaminants. But for these to be effective, they have to be designed properly, they have to be maintained, and that you have to have training in how to use them as well as a worker. And the general features you have of such local exhaust ventilation systems, or LEV systems, you start off with a hood, and the hood is close to the source of the generation of the fumes or the dusts or the vapors. There was some ducting, and it then goes up to what they call in the manual an air cleaner, which generally is some form of filtration or paper filters or something like that. Then the next feature is the fan, which draws air through the hood, draws the air through the hood and out through the fan, through the filters, through the fan, into the ducting and outside of the work area. So you've got you've got 5 particular components to that system. So what do they look like? Well, what are the considerations? Depending, the design of a local exhaust ventilation system depends on what type of contaminant you've got, where is it coming from, how fast is the contaminant being generated, what work processes are occurring, how much of the work process is actually enclosed. Maybe in some cases you have to look at it and you realize we've got to redesign this to really make best use of the exhaust ventilation.
Uh, just David, there's a note. The slide is small. Maybe there's a need to display the full screen.
This is the full screen. This is
Yes,
in full.
I responded to that person. You will have to look on your screen somewhere to find your enlargement, because it's filling my screen as well. I think it's just how you have your screen controls.
Mhm. Yeah, because
No,
I have
Dr.
the same.
Rangers, I'm also seeing the user control slide display instead of the full screen. So I think you are sharing the slide display rather than the full screen.
Okay.
Well, I'm in presentation mode, Ebenezer.
Yes, we are seeing the presentation controls rather than the screen as would have been displayed in a projector, for instance.
Do you think I might have dual screen going?
This is a speaker mode.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was in. Let me see.
Do you see 3 different
Yeah.
sections?
Yeah, so I see the main slide, the next slide, and then the notes section.
How does that sound?
Yes, so this is
It's okay.
this is fine now. Thank you.
Well, I've just put it to my other screen. So thanks, Ebenezer, for that. Most of the pictures there's not a lot of writing on these ones, so hopefully that's fine. Okay, so
Thank you.
a local exhaust ventilation system depends on the contaminant cloud and where it's coming from and how fast it's coming from. Point. The work processes that are actually occurring, whether we need to enclose that screen, that process, redesign the process to make sure the extract ventilation is working properly. Operator requirements that you'll see quite often that the extract local exhaust ventilation has to be moved around to match the process. And the hood itself needs to be of the right size, shape, and have the right airflow going through it. Thinking about the hoods, and if you look at these pictures, you can see on the right-hand picture where there was no extraction whatsoever, and the gentleman is using a cutting device on some form of stone or concrete. It looks like stone, actually. And it's going at right angles to him out into the workplace. And he's wearing a bit of a dust mask, but a lot of dust is going at right angles to where and in the direction of the movement of his blade that he's using. Similarly, on the left-hand side, you can see a bit of a hood here on the left-hand side of the picture, and the saw is cutting into the stone. And you can see the flow of the dust, some of which is going into the hood, but a lot of it is actually bypassing the hood. So that's not particularly effective. So you can see just how the dust cloud makes a big difference, and how it's being generated makes a big difference to whether or not you collect the dust. And I think I've covered most of those points actually just then. There are 3 different types of local exhaust ventilation hoods. There are enclosures, like on this top line, receiving hoods or receptor hoods or capture hoods. Enclosures refer to the fact that there is some degree of enclosure around the actual extraction system. So here we have a glove box type system, which is full enclosure. Here we have an open face one, but quite a lot of it is open. It is enclosed. There's a lot of enclosure around it. A smaller enclosure like a fume hood, or something like this activity here. Or it could be a room, and this is where a spray painting room for a car, where air comes in from the top and is drawn out of the bottom, and the worker works on the side here, spraying the car, painting the car. The receiving hood or the receptor hood, this works on the basis of the energy that is generated by the process, namely in this case a sanding wheel, generating the dust and fumes in the direction of where you place the hood. And you can see in that case, you know, that we're trying to collect all the dust from the dust which is being generated by all the energy that is being generated by the sanding wheel here is generating the energy to direct towards the hood, with some and also sometimes with some air provided here as well, but often it will be just a receiving hood. Or it could be a capture hood where you create a capture bubble, if you like, over the area that you're trying to collect by applying air movement through the fan, by drawing air through the hood. And the shape of the hood in this case and the location of the hood is very important to know for it to be effective. This is a type of example. For an enclosing hood, you work by having a glove box type system. The operator is not exposed at all to any dust under that process. In this case, there's the capture bubble effect, where you're trying to capture as much as possible, and there is a limit to where you will stop collecting the dust, and that length from the face to the minimum point of capture is called the capture the capture velocity distance. And once again, I think this is just saying the same thing again, where the hood is drawing air through. And but the next slide, here we have, in the next two slides, we have a drum of material, of liquid, which is volatile. And if you just take the lid off and you have a hood which is drawing off that evaporative vapor, then and you only need about 0.5 meters per second to capture at a certain distance over there to capture those vapors. Whereas if for that same drum, where you have a different process where you're filling the drum, you can see you have a much larger cloud to capture. And in this case, instead of 0.5, you need about 2.5 meters per second to capture the same vapors, because of the energy that is being put in by the filling of the drum. You'll see these types of arrangements in a lot of industries, where you have a fan up here, it exhausts back up here, and you have a flexible duct with a capture hood here, and that blue bit is known as the capture bubble. And to see what that looks like in practice, we have somebody who is doing some soldering here, and this lady is soldering along this point here. And at this point, you might be able to see the fumes going directly up there. However, by the time the lady goes to this side, the fumes will go up and miss the hood, unless she adjusts it as she goes. And so that's quite often the process will require repositioning of the capture hood as time goes on during the process. And another example, why is this not going forward? There we are. This is another process. We have the capture hood over this process, and the capture zone is around there. However, the working zone is there, so none of the working zone dusts and fumes are going to be captured by this device. And you can see it's quite a flexible, movable device, which can be positioned, should be able to be positioned. Other features you'll see on a, as well as the hood, you have, these are industrial level air cleaners with banks of filters shown in the green and the white areas there. You can have, these devices here are called cyclone filters, and the dust is spun around with the heavier dust particles being dropped out, and the waste air being sent through a ducting out of the system. Sometimes we can use wet processes or spray processes, and that one is a wet cyclone on the left, and on the right there is a spray induct spray system. And the actual fan itself, you'll hear about if you get into this in more detail, two different types of fans: an axial fan, where the air goes straight through the fan, or a centrifugal fan, which is air comes in through this area, through the fan. The fan wheel drives, goes around, and the gas comes out that way. So it's a right angle one. And it turns out that the centrifugal fan is a much more efficient way of generating air velocity. Whoops, sorry. Can you still see my slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's just I clicked and suddenly
Yes,
it went to, huh?
It's
All
okay.
good?
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, no, I clicked and suddenly it went into Microsoft Edge for some reason. And then when it discharges out, where you put the discharge is really important. This is an example of bad practice with having what's known as a Chinese hat discharge. It's called a rain hat, if you like, as well. And it basically creates a lot of turbulence around the exit from the vertical exit from the duct discharge. Often you'll have horizontal, you'll have a bit of a bend and it'll go out horizontally. I was at a place, I was in a hospital doing occupational hygiene yesterday, and one of their anesthetic gas discharges was outside the window, went out of the window, which great, outside the room, but the operating procedure says when you're doing this procedure, you have to open the window, which basically means that the anesthetic gases come back in again. So it's called re-entrainment. So you have to look at those, the way where the discharge happens in some detail. And the final slide I have is about maintenance, examination and testing of ventilation systems. In some countries, this is a legal requirement, but it's really important that any local exhaust ventilation system is tested at least, well, the legal requirement here is at least every 14 months, but you know, annually it should be tested, check that it should be maintained on a much more frequent basis. The filters should be changed, the ducts should be cleaned, and the operator should understand how to recognize whether something is not working or not properly. And so that's the slides there. So I will stop the share. And Emmanuel Quanza, yes, the capture hood does work on a similar position to a vacuum cleaner. In fact, a vacuum cleaner LEV systems do exist. So what I'd like to do now, Jen, is go to the case study, if that's okay, and I will. What's it not working? That's done that. And that one can go. And, are you there, Jen?
I'm so sorry. I was just talking away and I was muted.
It's
Jessica.
breakout session time.
Okay, okay. Jessica had her hand raised, but I think it has
Okay.
been lowered, so we'll
No,
go
she's,
to.
oh, sorry, I didn't see it, Jessica. Was there something in particular?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I just wanted a little bit insights concerning the receiver hood. I think it's pretty clear for the other two, but for the receiver.
Okay, well, yeah, Ajay had the same question before the session. And the capture hood works on the basis of you applying a strong suction, if you like. You apply air velocity to suck the air out from a static cloud, if you like an evaporating off a process. Whereas the receiver hood works on the fact that you use the energy that the grinding wheel or sanding wheel, for example, which generates dust, actually you direct that in the direction of the receiving hood. So the receiving hood actually receives the dust, and by the fact energy for the dust particles is provided by the source, namely the grinding wheel, rather than relying on a fan to suck it through the system.
So if I could just clarify, Dave, it has no fan.
It doesn't, well, it may have a fan, but it doesn't have to have a fan.
Okay,
I mean, there are versions which are both receiving and capturing, but a receiving hood will have a fan, but it's not reliant on that necessarily. I mean, for example, if you've got a grinding wheel, you actually enclose the receiving hood all the way around it, and it's a dual function. It's actually built into the same machine to have a dust collection from there on the side of the receiving hood, and the energy is actually,
yes,
but you're actually relying on the collection of the dust to capture the energetic dust particles, as opposed to sucking them and relying on the fan, because an LEV system always has a fan.
okay.
It's just that it's less, that's just the way it works. Okay, shall we pop the how shall we
I'm sorry, my only concern is, will they be able to see your case studies? How are we going to rely on the images that you sent me? How are we going to put those?
Okay, well, I could share my screen, could I not? I have them. I could share my screen, and we could allocate and then share my screen, or share my screen and then allocate to breakout rooms.
Second way, share your screen. We'll see what we're talking about, and then we'll go into the breakout session.
Very good. Where is it? What's it look like? And why can't I see it?
And Kingsford, I did see your question, which is, does that mean that the capture has oops, just lost it.
Does that mean that the
capture has a motor to draw the pollutants by itself?
Yeah, it's called a fan. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but you're relying on the energy provided by the fan, not the energy provided by the process. But all LEVs have a fan. It's just that the process one is just a housekeeping thing. It does because it doesn't generate, so the capture area for those dust in the receiving system is generated by the directional flow of the dust, and not the air that you provide through the fan to provide, because the dust has to move through the ducting anyway, and that's why you have a fan. But in the capture, you provide a lot of energy through the fan and air velocity through the fan, whereas the other one is by the process. Yeah.
Okay, now you have the 3 basic types of LEV hood displayed.
Yeah, good. Yeah, basically it's just in your breakout groups to discuss for each type, from your knowledge or experience, the types of industries or work activities you would find these types of, or you might expect to find these types of hoods.
Okay, I'm gonna type these in. Hopefully we can still see them once we're in our breakout
Yeah.
sessions.
They were circulated on WhatsApp earlier in the week, weren't they?
Yes, they were. Okay, so let's go into our breakout rooms and discuss the type of examples of industries and or work activities.
Yeah, I mean,
Where
it's
these
just
can
to
be
sort
found.
of exchange ideas of where you can see, where you may see these, where you may not.
Okay. Jessica had a quick question. Also, does this mean that with the receiver LEV, the source and the LEV itself are integrated?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
not
Maybe-
always, not always. Sometimes, not always.
Okay, here we go. Breakout rooms. I'm gonna, let's see, how many, there's 30 of us. So should we do 3? There's 4 coordinators here. Sala, Olindo, myself, and Dave.
Yeah,
So should we
Okay.
have 4?
yeah. And if we give ourselves till about the 1:45, yeah.
Okay. So that's only a very short time. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms. You'll be assigned automatically.
Excellent. Oh, great. Thank you.
There we go. Oh, Olindo, I guess it put you and I in the same room. Here we go. All right, we only have about 10 minutes. I can't, looks like it's all working. And all right. Hang on. Am I in a room? Can anyone hear me? Kwanzaa? Kwamina, can you hear me? Felicia? Whoops. Wow.
Hello.
Hello, hello. I was wondering if I was just okay.
Yeah,
Room
can you?
4. Am I in room 4? Or are we not assigned? Okay. Well, this may be all too, are there just the 4 of us? Do you go by Samuel or Kwamina?
Samuel.
Okay. Well, you and I are talking. Kennedy, Felicia, can you come off mute and talk to us? Hold to page. Okay, got it. Well, you and I, Kwamina, are the only ones here, which I don't understand. Huh. Well, okay. Dave is in one room. Olindo is in one room. Ah. Shall we join? I'm gonna move you to room, oh. Have you not hit join? Sala. I'm going to join room 3. Hit join. Kwamina.
So I have to join a different group.
I'm sorry?
Are you saying we have to join a different group or
I'm gonna hit join room 3. Because there's no other person in there. No other tutor coordinator. See you in room 3.
okay.
Okay. Are we all going to come back now? It's just me. Great, we're all coming back now. We'll have to wait for the other three groups though. One, two, three, four, five, nearly there. Well, that's our group back, I think. Well done, everybody. I'll send a WhatsApp.
We are back.
Excellent. I've just sent something on WhatsApp to remind everybody. So thanks, Stella. We go okay, Stella?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I have sore throat, so maybe you'll have coarse voice.
Let's see. I'm going to close all rooms.
Excellent. I suggested so we'll be back very soon. We'll give them 1 or 2 minutes, but I think I'll just move on to the next session. Yeah.
Well, the problem was we didn't tell them how to exit the breakout room. So, it can be sort of daunting when you're looking around your screen and you can't. Bernard was like, "How do I get back?"
Help me.
Yes, help me, I'm lost.
He
Which
was
is
in my yeah. He had plenty of time. He was in my group.
Oh, okay. Hello, welcome back, everyone. So sorry we didn't tell you how to exit, but if you will move your cursor in the lower right-hand corner, you just wiggle it around when you're in a breakout room, it will pop up a blue note that says leave the breakout session.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. For the next one, I think given the time, I'll just do asbestos slides, and I've given them very quickly the case study they can read, and
Okay.
so that's fine.
Okay.
So if I start to share my screen, and find where that there it is. And you need to check that I'm in the correct presentation mode. One can go. If I go into that one, and I go into display settings and that one, you should be able to see it now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, we're moving topic now, and the next topic is asbestos. And there's a whole course on asbestos you could spend 5 days doing with workplace with these types of courses, but I'm going to go quickly through the highlights of what asbestos is and why it's important. And these this is a picture of some asbestos. You can see it is very fibrous. It's when you look through a microscope at it. And this is a quote from 1898, which says that the evil effects of asbestos dust, sharp, glass-like, jagged nature of the particles, this leads to the effects of it have found to be injurious. That means over 125 years ago, the world knew that asbestos was nasty when it came to workplace health aspects. This little flow chart tells me that asbestos is in two types of minerals. As a serpentine asbestos, which gives you chrysotile, which is what also known as white asbestos, or a amphibole type of mineral, which is broken down into chrysotolite or blue asbestos, amosite, which is brown asbestos, all these other three types of asbestos, which are anthracite, tremolite, and actinolite. It's the white, blue, and brown asbestos that we'll consider today. And it's the main ones that have been used in industry. So what is asbestos? Well, it's a naturally occurring mined fibrous silicate mineral with various compositions and structures, and it has been used really extensively because it is an incredibly fantastic heat insulator and a material which resists fire. And commercially, you know, it's probably the best insulator and fire resistant material that's been commonly available. And you can find it in numerous different forms. You can find it in sheets, in boards, and rope, or mixed in with things like plaster in building materials. So it's really common, or has been really common in use. These are pictures of asbestos mines, and it is still mined in certain countries in the world, like Canada, Russia, and a few other places. When it comes out of the ground, it comes as part of the mineral rock mixture, and you can actually see little fibers in these three pictures if you looked at them really closely. So it's, you know, it is really quite visible in the mined material. So what's a fiber? Well, a fiber is defined as a long, thin structure. Well, I think we knew that. And but it's actually defined by what's called the aspect ratio. That is its width to length, its length to width ratio. That's actually the wrong way around on the slide. And it can be man-made, it can be mineral, it can be animal, it can be vegetable. Asbestos is a fiber, but there's also other fibers that aren't asbestos. You'll know about mineral wool, maybe cotton, ordinary wool from sheep and goats and so forth, or carbon fibers made, you know, you can make into different types of products. So here's the World Health Organization's definition of a fiber. And, you know, it has to have a length which is longer than 5 micrometers, and a micrometer is 1/1000th of a millimeter. So you can see they're very fine in length, and their diameter is even less, 3 micrometers. So three micrometers. And for a fiber to be called a fiber, its aspect ratio, that is the L divided by the D, the length divided by the diameter, has to be more than 3 to 1. That means it's got to be 3 times as long as it is wide. And fibers of up to 100 micrometers long have been found in the deep recesses of the lung, down in the alveolar areas of the lung. So these types of fibers can go right down into your lungs and stay there and cause toxicological and mechanical impacts to the lung. And so moving on, so asbestos, super stuff, really fire resistant. It's got great mechanical strength, it's got great chemical resistance, it's got great thermal insulation, except as you'll know from the toxicological part, asbestos causes lung cancer, mesothelioma, which is cancer of the lining of the lung, the outside lining of the lung. It causes asbestosis, which causes you not able to breathe as easily as you can, because you can't. It basically ties up the lung with it stops the lung expanding as easily as it should do. So you have to breathe harder, and it's harder, and so on. So there's several different toxicological reasons that asbestos has been banned in many countries since around about 2000. These are some of the examples that we have. It could be around pipes to provide thermal insulation. It could be in a gasket between two pipeline joints. It could be as rope or string, which you wrap around to create a insulation. It could be in ceiling tiles, or in the underneath the what called the soffits of houses, where the guttering is here. It could be as fire blankets or as cement sheets, these corrugated cement sheets, which are very common around the world. And so, it's used and has been used for many purposes. And this table, which is in your manual, shows the different products and the type of asbestos that's actually in them typically. And this is typically because it can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, and the approximate content of the asbestos. Anything from 1% right up to 100%, depending on the type of material. And also note the one down here, friction materials, for example, or car brakes and clutch linings. When you go out on the street and you are probably breathing in or have breathed in some asbestos fibers because of the cars having old brakes and clutch linings which contain asbestos. For the last 10 or 15 years, alternative products have been in cars and car parts, and they're not used, but there's still maybe some old vehicles around, or old brake linings and clutch linings around. So if you're a person just walking by the street or more, or working in a mechanic shop, that could be a major source of workplace health concern. So what how much airborne asbestos fibers will come in? Well, just by removing lagging using a dry process, you can get up to 100 fibers per milliliter of air. Drilling causes up to 10 of boards, or sawing. Drilling into asbestos cement, which contains less asbestos, you can get 1 fiber per milliliter of air. And if you just think of a cubic meter of air that you have in front of you, and imagine the number of fibers that could be in these sorts of situations, and the numbers get really large. Using a circular saw to do the cutting generates 20 times much as dust as hand cutting or drilling. To put that in perspective, at the moment here in Great Britain, the control limit for asbestos fibers per cubic per mil of air is 0.1 fiber per mil. So you can see you don't need much of a asbestos activity dealing with asbestos fibers to generate many times the control limit or workplace exposure limit. And Great Britain has one of the higher control limits around the world. There are lower control limits in many other countries. So what do we do then in terms of managing asbestos? Well, the first thing we need to do is know where we've got it. And so we create an asbestos register. We record the presence and use of asbestos containing materials at all sites. Where they're located, what their condition is, and before any work is done where asbestos containing materials exist, there has to be a proper operating procedure to work in there. Because, for example, if it's in the ceiling tiles and you want to do some electrical work there, the electricians have to know that asbestos is in those ceiling tiles and have to adopt very specific work practices to deal with that. And basically you buy equipment and use equipment which doesn't contain asbestos wherever possible, or failing that, have a plan to make the asbestos either safe or remove it. And the next slide is about removing asbestos, and the removal is where you have to remove the asbestos itself. So the worker, you can see here, is in coveralls and has gloves, is wearing respiratory protection, and the methodology that would be needed to remove the asbestos containing materials depends on the state of them, but in many cases wet methods are used with vacuum cleaners and local exhaust ventilation type systems to remove the asbestos fibers during the removal process. And so there's a whole work way of doing it, or it has to be defined. The alternative is if we have we just want to repair or the asbestos that's in place, and that we do that by something called encapsulation, using covering the outer surface either by wrapping with a material such as canvas or aluminium, or sealing with an encapsulant. And the encapsulants are often things like liquid PVA, polyvinyl acetate containing solutions. So that's the those are the slides, and I just wanted to quickly how do I get out of this? I've stopped sharing, haven't I? So if I go to this one, your case study that was issued was from and I'll just start sharing my screen again. From it took you to this website, that one, I believe. Share screen. So let me know if you see this now. Oops. Okay, are you seeing the screen?
Yes,
Yes.
we're
Yes,
seeing
we see.
remedial treatment.
University of Edinburgh.
Yes,
Now,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Did everybody, people had a look at this case study?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. So for those that haven't, please read through it, because this is a really good example of the types of methods that are used to remove asbestos in a building. And it starts off by saying a background to the fact it's been in there since the 1960s as a fire retardant, and they came up with a plan to realize that they had to remove it because it was in a dangerous situation. In this little picture here, that yellow there is actually an encapsulated beam of asbestos containing material. So that is after treatment. And that was what they were as part of the refurbishment of the building. The contractor had to be licensed, had to notify the authorities and so on. They got some experts in to do some monitoring. This picture here shows how they set it up, a particular enclosure. So it's a several stage to go in and come out. You go in, you get dressed, you go through, you come out, you get undressed, you clean yourself, and then get into your work clothes, and it's that sort of entrance and exit process. The whole area there is under negative pressure. so that any leaks would be inwards. And then they talk about the design of that. The yellow thing here next to this, there is a air monitor for asbestos, and that's part of the monitoring process and during the removal. And then this is the this is actually them encapsulating with a PVA. I think they used a PVA type glue coating here for that particular process, and then they painted it yellow. But after that, they then had to get rid of the waste, and there's a picture of the decontamination unit for the workers. So they go in here, they get changed into the work stuff. Then when they come out, they do the reverse, shower into clean clothes and come out again. And the waste itself is double bagged, it's labeled, and various other things. So there's a whole process on how to remove asbestos and how to treat asbestos. So I just like, if you haven't seen, just read that again in some detail if you can. But because I think it's a really good example of how to do something, do asbestos removals and encapsulations in the correct manner. Okay.
Dave, there's a couple of questions, but I think you answered one of.
Okay, Jessica, where it's after it's removed, it goes to a controlled and licensed landfill.
Yes.
And Lloydetta, in terms of the wet method for asbestos control, well, for example, if I was taking an asbestos sample for analysis, I will wear all the PPE and the respiratory protection, and I would use a method where I would wet the surface first with water and then remove very carefully the wetted material I want to test. I would then cover the area and put it into the laboratory sampling mechanism, whether it's a tube or a bag, and label it up and all that sort of thing. And then I would cover the area that I've sampled, and then I might even label it so that I can come back to find it in the future and replace that label with an asbestos label if I find a positive asbestos. Okay, so thank you for your question on that one. Okay, shall we move on?
Yes. I think time-wise,
Yeah, if we can go till about 4:30-ish perhaps, or what do you think?
yes. So it is Olindo's time,
Yeah.
I believe, to talk about, biological hazards.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, let me, okay.
Yeah, so make it bigger and
Yeah.
presentazione.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we have to talk about biological hazard. So you are probably familiar with this warning sign shown here. So this is a warning sign for biohazard. Biohazard can include bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So, for example, mold. Now, let's have a look at common material and industry-based hazard. So we focus on biological hazard. So in many ways, biological hazards are more dangerous than chemical agents. So they are able to replicate themselves very fastly and given the right conditions. So this replication makes them very difficult to control once they have entered the human body. Let's see some definitions. So we have bacteria, viruses, and mold. So what are bacteria? Are single-celled microorganisms that live in soil, water, air, and even in our bodies. So there are many thousands of different types of bacteria. Many are harmless or even beneficial for our cases. So now we see viruses are tiny parasitic organisms that can only reproduce within living cells. So the largest known viruses is approximately 1,000 times smaller than the average bacteria. And the last one is fungi. So are simple plants lacking chlorophyll and normal plant structure. Fungi includes molds and, for example, mushrooms. What is immunity? Immunity is the power of the individual to resist diseases. The way a person's body reacts to being exposed to bacteria, viruses, and fungi depends on their state of immunity. There are many factors that involve the immunity, including, for example, if the individual has already experiences the illnesses, if immunization levels, individual resistance, fatigue, and last but not least, age. And it's only my opinion, probably work-related stress that doesn't help our immunity. Now let's see 4 groups of risk. So group 1, group 2, 3, and 4. So I can see, as you can see, group 4 is the most important dangerous group for human body. And same, we see that we have 4 biosafety levels. So level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So as you can see in the level 4, so we can have we have many measurements, for example, separate building, controlled area, negative pressure. Let's talk now about the Legionella. I think that everybody knows what is Legionella. Legionella is a bacteria. Legionella or Legionella pneumophila is a bacteria mostly found in human-made water environments where the water system is not treated properly. If the water is properly treated, the risk is 0. So we have no risk for Legionella. Legionella enters into the body when fine droplets of contaminated water are inhalated. So we can enter with we can contact the Legionella by the breathing zone, not by water. So the bacterium is not transmitted from person to person. This is important. And so it's impossible, for example, by a kiss. Where we can find the Legionella? So, for example, cooling tower, water storage tanks, and calorifers, hot and cold water, for example, where a hospital, hotel, and spa, bath, pools, and also in fire sprinkler system and fountain. Legionella grows best in environments where, for example, water temperature is in the range 20-45 degrees. Water is stagnant. There is a sediment, and there are other microorganisms, for example, a biofilm. How we can control Legionella? So the primary way of preventing and controlling the spread of the Legionella disease to control the initial growth of the bacterium in water system and prevent water from becoming aerosolized. So the temperature, so avoid the temperature between 20 and 45, minimizing the release of water spray, avoiding water stagnation, keeping the water system clean and treating the water, and sampling to assess water quality. This is an essential part of water treatment regime and should include both chemical and microbiological tests. Talking about humidifier fever, so is associated with exposure to many different types of microorganisms, including various bacteria and fungi found in the humidifier. So we can find this fever in ventilation system. So what are the risks? So for example, fever, fatigue, headache, and also flu, for example. Talking about blood-borne diseases, so we have to talk about the transmission of viral blood-borne diseases in workplace can occur through infected blood and other body fluids, for example, coming in contact with the mucous membranes and not intact skin. So who can be exposed? For example, healthcare workers, emergency workers, and everybody can work in countries with high rates of illnesses. How is viruses controlled? So, for example, it's very important to wear protective gloves and face masks. So taking care with a sharp object, ensuring all equipment is appropriately sterilized, safe disposal of infected material, good hygiene procedure, and last but not least, immunization. Now we have two types of hepatitis, B and C, and the last one is HIV. So hepatitis B, so is a blood-borne and a sexually transmitted virus, which can cause inflammation of the liver. The virus may be transmitted by contact with infected blood or body fluids from an infected person. What are the symptoms? For example, many infected people have no symptoms, and hepatitis B can cause inflammation of the liver and long-term liver damage. Talking about the hepatitis C, so this is another type of hepatitis. So it is also blood-borne viruses that can cause inflammation of the liver. What are the symptoms? For example, fatigue, weight loss, nausea, and problem for the concentrating. And last one is HIV. So HIV means human immunodeficiency viruses. So it's a sexually transmitted and blood-borne viruses. What are the symptoms? So people with HIV usually have no symptoms for a long period, while the virus acts slowly. Usually, the cause of illnesses and eventual death in a person with HIV is not the virus itself, but the illnesses related with the virus. now talk about the zoonosis. So zoonosis are infections that are naturally transmitted from animals to humans. So zoonosis is can cause the infection. So, for example, from animal and animal products, for example, meat, skins, wool, animal tissues, and the body fluids, for example, blood and saliva, bird of products, for example, placenta, waste products, for example, urine and fishes, and contaminated materials, for example, the clothing. Let's talk about the anthrax. Anthrax caused by the spore-forming bacteria, Bacillus anthracis in Latin. Many animals may carry the anthrax bacteria or spores. There are two types of anthrax, so that can cause a skin disease or lung disease. The main occupation at risk are, for example, agricultural workers, or, for example, the vets. And okay, let's go on. Leptospirosis may be transmitted through the contact with the rat's urine and water contaminated with it. Who can be exposed, for example, farm workers, fish farmer, construction worker, or, for example, worker in the laboratory. Salmonellosis is an infection caused by the Salmonella group of bacteria. Salmonella bacteria may be carried by most types of farm animals. So what are the symptoms? For example, headache, nausea, fever, diarrhea, for example, septicemia. Q fever is another infection caused by Coxiella burnetii, and a type of bacterium found worldwide, except in New Zealand. The infection is almost related with the direct and indirect contact with animals. So, for example, sheep and goats. Although a wide range of animals, including, for example, cats and dogs, may carry the infection. Now let's see the difference. For example, two words: epidemic and pandemic. So, what is epidemic? So, epidemic is an outbreak of infection, diseases that it is contained to a relatively restricted geographic area. Different situation we have with pandemic. So pandemic is an epidemic of an infection disease that spread over the wide geographic area. So we have seen a pandemic with a COVID, for example. So, and pandemic affect a large portion of the population. So this is a different situation from epidemic and pandemic. So pandemic is something larger than epidemic. Okay, I finish my my presentation.
Thank you, Olindo.
Let me
Thank
stop.
you, sir.
Yeah, let me stop my share. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was just wondering if people had any thoughts on the fact that we're probably all very expert now on biological hazards in the terms of pandemics and COVID-19. And if you think back to COVID-19 and all the precautions that we went through and we're putting on to control the spread of that pandemic, and how difficult it was to actually control it, and because we didn't know about, it was all new to everybody, wasn't it? So including the scientific community.
If you allow me, I'd like to comment.
Of course.
In oil and gas in 2000, you can say 2007, at the time where we start having the emerging diseases, and we've started hearing about very strange diseases, Congo fever disease, Nile River fever, so many diseases. So we said, as oil and gas, let us do mapping for all the biological hazards. And we classify the hazards into macrobiology and macrobiology. We looked at the area where we have the material of interest, either from the animals or plants, or for the vipers. Even we covered the snakes and scorpions and other type of lizards, etc. And we collect some of the animals which might be having a role in the diseases. For example, in Q fever, in all the area we have the oil and gas, we have small zoos, etc. So we took some samples. What I'm trying to say is that, and this also answering the question our colleague here asked, why we don't have Q fever in New Zealand. This depends on so many factors. In our study, we found that Legionella is not a big issue in the UAE. They studied it when I was working in UAE. So it was the bacteria, it is there. But also there are so many details about the bacteria for the classification and for the type of pathogenic, non-pathogenic. Not all the Legionella is pathogenic. So we after we did the initial study, we followed up for the number of almost 2 years for the to see to what extent that it might be a concern from a public health point of view, and we found no, it is not a big concern. What I'm trying to say is that, yeah, biological hazards, it's again a very big issue, and we might face at any time the same what we have seen in COVID-19 overnight, the same also when we have the bird flu and we have the different type of infections. So we need to be vigilant, and we need to read a lot in order to cope with the information what we have. So we need to exactly know what we need to do. And when we start hearing about COVID-19 and what are the risk factors and how to control it, and we have what we call it the fomite infection, that you might have the surface contaminated with the COVID-19. At the beginning, it was a very big concern, and the sanitization, it took too much time and effort. But at the end of the COVID-19, we realized that the fomite infection and the surface contamination is not considered. While when we start talking about the ventilation, at the beginning, we said, if you are away from the infected person 2 meters, this means you will be totally safe. But we find no, it's totally the story is different. Now, when we talk about the virus, it is airborne. So the issue is that we need to keep updated. We need to know exactly what we have in our working environment, what is relevant to us, and accordingly, we need to address it. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very true. And that's why we're all interested in this subject, I think, is so that we can, hopefully, so that we can continue to ask good questions and how to protect workers. And thank you, Salah, very much. Ebenezer, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So my understanding is that inhalation of biological agents is a big part of biohazards to consider. I realized you touched on Legionella, but then I'm also wondering what other biological agents, whether viable or not non-viable ones, that are also of occupational concern. For instance, dead spores from fungi, and all of that. Knowing that, especially for a place like Ghana, we don't pay a lot of attention to, for instance, fungi and spores and everything, and mold growth in workplaces and all of that. So if you could touch a little bit on that one, I would be happy. Yeah.
I didn't understand the question.
May I answer it, Olindo? Just to give an example. The question was, are there ways, well, I shouldn't say control. If there is any concentration, let me answer it this way. If there is any concentration of contaminated water, and you may say contaminated with what? If it's stagnant for a while, whether it's inside of an air conditioner, inside of a humidifier, you should either ask the manufacturer or look up online how to keep that the contamination either out or at a lower level. Yeah. And
you know that there are no exposure limit for biological hazards, so we have to keep the level in the lowest level as possible, because only one virus or only one bacterial can cause illness. So in this field, prevention is everything.
yes. And we are talking about healthy workers. Usually they're healthy if they come to work. But there are also immune compromised people from either diseases or from taking different chemicals that can come to work and are in your workplace, but that are particularly sensitive to different bacteria or viruses. So you need to be aware of that.
Also because we are all different. So I am different from Saleh. So I am immune system different from each other. So this is why only one bacteria can cause illness. So that's why we must to keep the level as low as reasonable possible. So we have to adopt so ALARP. So is the same for the non-ionizing radiation, for example, about the biological hazard.
Olindo Lordetta had a question in the chat box.
Yeah, sorry.
How the biological test, what is the biological test for the Legionella? How is it done?
Yeah, there are two kinds of tests. One for water and one for ventilation. But my experience was only for water. So we can contact the Legionella by breathing, but by vapor. So for example, in hotels, when we shave, so when we take a shower, but it's impossible to drink Legionella. So if we drink Legionella, nothing happens. But only when we breathe the vapors, including the Legionella bacteria. Okay, so that's why it's important to keep the temperature of water for example, 51 degree. So 51 degree is the temperature that kill the bacteria of Legionella.
Just to mention also for Legionella, very interesting fact. Legionella is a bacteria, and usually for bacteria we use to add chlorine for chlorination, and will kill the bacteria. But the problem with the Legionella is that it hides in other creation, amoeba. So it will be protected from the normal chlorination level. So this is why it make it more difficult. This is number one. Number two is that Legionella, it is everywhere in the environment almost, and it might have so many variances, and some of them is pathogenic, some are not. And EPA doesn't recommend to have for Legionella testing, but we might have a surrogate for the water quality that been used. And maybe it's not the good what Orlando mentioned is to control the water system, the one used in the either in the humidifier or the one used in the shower or water system. If we control it well, this means that no need to do any test for the water itself.
Same, for example, for the cooling tower, for the ventilation system. So, but it's important the safety procedure to hygiene practice, either for water and for ventilation system.
Yeah, just because also very interesting point I remember just now. One of the good practices to prevent the growth of Legionella. Legionella, if it is stagnant for some time, it will be increased to the number of the bacteria which might be able to have sufficient dose to cause illness. So what we recommend for the shower, the water used in shower or eye wash, to flush it in order to prevent, and this could be every month or every 2 weeks. So we will not allow the bacteria to multiply to the level that might cause the disease. And the Legionella, it might be mild, the percent. Okay, I think maybe this could be in the other session. Thank you.
Very nice. So let's talk about the noise, Dave.
You read my mind. We have the technology. Okay, the final section is going to be noise, and I will go through some slides and I'll show you some do a demonstration and show some equipment. The case study that you saw, you can think about that, but we won't. I don't think we'll have time to get to that. So if I start sharing my screen, okie dokie, that's there, right. And that should be coming up, and then display settings and that one.
Very
Okay,
good.
so we're there, we're good, thank you. So last session for today is on noise. And well, what is noise? Well, noise is simply unwanted sound. And it's but when the intensity and the energy of that noise is so great, it can cause hearing loss with people who work in lots of different industries. And sound is actually a sensation that is perceived by the human or animal brain, and it's basically a result of a variety of longitudinal vibrations of molecules in the air coming into your ear. And actually sound is actually what's called a pressure wave, which is caused by a vibrating vibrations from a source of that noise. So if we look at, and I think we've all got one of the, well, we've all got two of these, hopefully. The ear, and I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. Obviously, there's lots of different terms and so forth, but the key thing is that noise is collected by your outer ear, called the pinna here. The pinna, it's focused into the ear canal. It then goes on to what's called the eardrum, which beats which causes a vibration, or like if you had a drum, you were beating a drum. Now, the energy that is created from that eardrum is then transferred through these three small bones. These are actually bones, the smallest bones in the body: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, and they basically tune down or gear down the actual intensity of the noise, or the power of the noise, and they then transfer the noise signal to this point, which is called the oval window of the cochlea, and that's where the inner ear does all its stuff, where basically the cochlea is, you can think about it as hair cells and hairs being distributed along the cochlear surface, with nerves from each hair fiber being collected by the central auditory system and going to the brain to interpret noise. The other thing on this picture is this tube down here called the eustachian tube in the middle ear. That basically means that the middle part of the ear here, where the hammer, anvil, and stirrup do their thing, is actually connected to the nose and your sinuses and your mouth. And that's why if you get a cold, or you can often have hearing problems because you get an infection inside that middle ear. So for us to hear sound, it has to be audible, and it's audible because of two features: the frequency of the sound and the intensity of the sound. And the frequency is simply the number of pressure waves or vibrations per second, and it's measured in hertz. And the more fluctuations per second that you get, the higher the pitch you have of sound. The other feature is the intensity, and by that we mean the size of the pressure waves and the amount of energy the pressure waves have passing through a unit area in a unit time, and the units that are given there are watts per square meter. If we look at what sound pressure actually is, it's just a pressure wave superimposed on atmospheric pressure. And today here, atmospheric pressure is about 1010 bars, or hectopascals. And that is, so sound pressure is on top of the atmospheric pressure, and that difference causes a disturbance to have sound pressure move through atmospheric pressure, or the atmosphere. The next concept that you've probably heard of decibels, and sound pressure level is what's known as a logarithmic relationship between the actual pressure relative to a standard reference value pressure. And there is a formula, and it defines what a decibel is. But essentially 1 decibel is related to a just noticeable difference between sound levels by the human ear. Practical terms, the decibel and the ear is an amazing bits of units and equipments respectively. If you think of the lowest measurable sound level, and that's the reference level down here, is 0.00002 pascals. And whereas if you have a rock and roll band or a jet engine, that could be 20 pascals in your ear. So you can see that decibel, when you by using a logarithmic scale, you convert the pascals on the left-hand side of this picture to decibels on the right-hand side, and you get what was known as sound pressure level decibels between 0 to 120, and it's simply a much more manageable scale to use on a day-by-day basis. So what's the effect of excessive noise? Well, you can go deaf. Noise-induced hearing loss in the workplace is extremely common, and it just comes from an individual being consistently, the cumulative effect of repeated exposure to high levels of noise. Because the thing about those hair cells in the cochlea of the inner ear, which transfers which senses the frequency and intensity of the noise and sends it up to the brain to convert that into sound and speech and all those, and music. Those hair cells can get damaged and they don't grow back. They just die. And you start off with, I don't know, 100,000 or so, and you lose them over time. And if you are in a workplace which is particularly noisy, you lose them faster over time. The second effect is tinnitus, and tinnitus is ringing in the ears. And you can get that anywhere. I mean, you can get it when you're falling asleep in the evening, if you're just driving your car in a quiet area, or you're working in a quiet area, or you're doing things which aren't in noisy areas, workplaces. Then tonight you can get ringing in your ears, and it's an indication of previous potential hearing loss effects. Third one is temporary threshold shift, and this is where the hair cells are just impaired and not actually they're not knocked down forever. And so the example is, if you go to I've been to a music concert in a hall in a very loud environment, and you come out and your hearing is deadened, but after about half an hour or so, the hair cells wake up again, and you have most of your hearing back again. I mean, there may be some damage done of a permanent nature in those cases, or may not be. Physical damage can occur, and this is where you can have like a very strong explosion or a firing of a gun right next to your eardrum, your ear, and the pressure is so large it just damages or bursts the eardrum and may damage the small ossicle bones, those hammer, stirrup, and anvil bones in the middle ear. And finally, noise can just be annoying, or cause stress, or cause poor concentration or irritability, or such things as that. And it just is really hard to concentrate, or causes irritation. Okay, so numerically, what does noise mean? Well, for example, if you have two sound levels, basically a doubling of sound pressure of sound pressure is equivalent to an increase of 3 decibels, 3 decibel units. So if you have this little table says, well, if you have two noise sources, which imagine you've got two pieces of equipment, and they're emitting, one is emitting noise at 85 decibels, and a similar piece of equipment is emitting at 89 decibels. Well, the difference between the 83 and 89 is 6 decibels. So that means that in fact the noise measurement, the noise in the area is the highest one, which is 89, plus, because it's between 4 and 9, 1 decibel, so 90 decibels. So that's how this little table works, and it works. It works in many circumstances. I mean, here's an example again of how that works. Imagine we have some. We're cutting concrete with a jackhammer. We've got 2 people doing it side by side. Both of the machines generate 90 decibels on their own, but when you put them next to each other, the table tell us to add 3 dB, 93 decibels. So that's a good way to see estimate activities in the workplace of the effects of sound. We can also do octave band analysis, frequency analysis, and we can see whether, I mean, this is taken near a machine of some that is emitting a sound which is of mostly low frequency at 250 hertz or lower, with some higher frequencies in the 1 to in the higher levels to 1 hertz to 1,000 to 16,000 hertz. Decibels, when you see them written down in workplace situations, they often might have a letter after them, such as dBA or dBc, and the dBA one is what's known as a weighting system, which reflects the human ear and how it works in terms of being sensitive to more certain frequencies, more sensitive to certain frequencies than others. And that's what my sound level meter is based on and shows is the dBA value, or in some cases the dBc value if you have impacts. And you can see in this graph how the different weighting systems, like the blue one here is the A system. That's how our ears actually hear. Our hearing as actually picks up the various different frequencies. And the C one here is a much more linear one, which is flat across a lot of the frequencies. In the manual, you have this one, and this shows that if we were to average over a period of time, the variation in sound level, and this is in decibels, dBA noise levels. And you can see it varies with time. You get some higher ones, some lower ones, and so forth. But the average of that particular graph is up here. And you can see that because of these small peaks have a bigger effect than the low peaks in terms of getting your average for that particular period of exposure. Noise dose varies with duration, and you can say, and the limit is usually for 85 dBA is usually for 8 hours. You can see by reducing, if you have increased amounts of exposure, you can have your safe level time decreases rapidly. And the next one I wanted to show you was just demonstrate. Now, if I come off, if I just stop sharing for a moment, I'm going to show you a sound level meter and a noise dosimeter. And if I happen to have one here. This is my sound level meter. It looked a bit like, but it's more modern than the one that you have in the book. And the other thing I have here is a picture of a example of a dosimeter, and this here is the microphone, which is going into electronic circuitry within there. I put that on the worker. Well, I put that on the worker. They wear it through the work shift, and I get numbers. I get a printout a bit like this. Where am I? That one. Okay, I'm going to just share another screen here to give you an idea. That one there. And in the examples I've got here is as I have a very cooperative worker. His name is Dave, the occupational hygienist. And can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And this is an example of a download of a dosimeter that I wore. It was at a university. I was doing some monitoring, and it indicates that the fire alarm went off at around about 1 o'clock, 1300. And if you look at the blue level down here, that is the LAEQ averages, and you can see that the numbers went up quite substantially when the fire alarm went off. If I move to the other one, when Dave was in a different location, come down there, yeah, and we look at this one, and in this case, I was next to a in a transformer room at an electrical substation, and if you look over here, my LAEQ was 87.9 for the day. The actual exposure limit is 85. I was wearing hearing protection for that, and you can see that at about just after 10:10, I went into the substation, and for 10:10 to 10:25, I was making measurements in there, and the numbers were well above 85 decibels when I was in there. The other thing I can get off here is the frequency distribution. In this case, very low frequency I can measure there, and I can also indicate, this indicates that, you know, my exposure over 8 hours would have been 87.9, which means that I need to be wearing hearing protection when I'm in there. So there's lots of good scientific equipment around that will demonstrate and monitor for noise aspects. I'll just finish off the slides. I don't think there's anything too many more. That should be coming back now. I'm on the last couple of slides. So you can do noise surveys of areas and find out where the hotspots are and where treatment areas need to be done, and then controlling the workplace noise. Reducing noise at source is always the best. Failing that, enclose noisy equipment if you can. Think about the pathway between the source and the receptor, which is the individual. So enclosure, screening, absorbing materials can all be used as hearing protection, for noise abatement, sorry. You can wear earmuffs or earplugs or other devices, or you can simply create noise refuges in designated areas where people rotate people so that you limit their exposures, or wear hearing protection. So I think, Jen, if we can just run the last 3 questions. I think I've finished sharing, haven't I? Hello.
So sorry, I was on mute. Let me see if I can launch this.
Yeah,
have
this will only
3
take a couple of minutes, so, you know.
Is anyone seeing that?
Yes, thank you. So shall we do the first one first, or are we going to answer all three? Which one? How are we going to do this, Jen?
Well, I thought they could click on it and actually answer it themselves, and then we come back and discuss it.
Okay. Okay, so please answer all 3 questions, yes?
Yes. I'm trying to make. Uh-oh, there we go.
Yeah, I've just answered it.
Okay, I was trying as well. I was like, oh, as I.
So how's the numbers looking coming in on the?
They're rapidly increasing. 5 have answered. Hopefully everyone can see that. That meaning the poll, the quiz. 6. And yes, we're going to go through the answers fairly quickly when we get a few more people. If you're having trouble with that, please speak up. 6 people have answered it. There we go, 7. By the way, your name is not displayed. We don't know who answered what. This is a learning experience. It's not intended to say who's right and who's wrong. So please, if you don't know the exact right answer, answer what you think is appropriate, and then Dave will go through them. We have 10 answers out of 27 now, Dave.
Thank you. Well, we'll forgive them another couple of moments.
Sure. 12 out of 27. As I say, they're coming online. 13.
I always like to see the graphs at the end of this.
Yes, it's good. 14. 15. 59% participation. So if you'll give me a percentage, I'll end the poll and we can talk about it.
Okay. Well,
62%.
Okay, shall we go for 70 and then
All right.
flash it
Sounds
up?
good.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's sort of
66%, 18 people. Your folks are doing really good. Thank you so much. 69%. All right. Going to give them just a few seconds. It's only been 3 minutes since we started before I end the poll. One more, finish the poll and we'll stop and discuss it. There we go.
excellent. Okay, let's see the graph. Okie dokie. Right. Well, can you
see that?
I can't. Oh, yeah, I can use the. I think I can use the slide. Well done, everybody, for number 1. That is the correct answer. Hood, air cleaner, fan, and duct are the key components in a local exhaust ventilation system. Number 2. Well, I think nearly all of you got the correct answer, which was, what are the 3 main forms of asbestos? White, blue, and brown, chrysotile, chrysotolite, and amosite. Excellent. And number 3, what are the control? Some of you were almost listening to my second to last slides, and it's been a long afternoon, I think. Which control measures for noise hazards can be best addressed by using the following hierarchy of control? And the answer actually is B, source, pathway, receiver. Think about the source first. Address that first, then think about the pathway, address that for next second, and then think about the receiver, namely the worker. If you can eliminate the noise at source, you don't have to worry about the next two. You don't need to wear hearing protection. You don't need to have barriers in the way of putting up fancy and expensive sound absorption measures. And then, if all else fails, PPE, earmuffs and earplugs. Okay, everybody.
All right.
I think we can close that one. And just to remind everybody, next time we're starting at 1 o'clock because of the Ramadan, to accommodate Ramadan. And next time we are going to be looking at sections 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Vibration, thermal, lighting and non-ionizing radiation, ionizing radiation, and ergonomics. And I believe the presenter is going to be myself.
Correct.
And
Correct.
there will be some case studies. I think I've done I might have done 4 case studies. I can't remember, 3 or 4 case studies. They'll be sent to you very soon. And there'll be a bunch more questions like we did today at the end.
Yes. Well, thank everybody. Thank you, everyone. I believe those case studies are already loaded, meaning when I release all the information or pages around those subjects that Dave just mentioned, the case studies will be released at the same time. So take a look at that information. You will receive a notification of the change in time, as Dave mentioned. I'll do that on WhatsApp. I'll also send out the same link for joining. But with that, I thank both our tutors and our coordinator, Sala, and for the great help that everyone has provided. And of course, we wouldn't bother doing this without our great participants. So thank you all so much for giving of your Saturday. And we'll see you next Saturday at 1 o'clock your time. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you
Thank you.
later.
See you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything we tutors, coordinators need to talk about? I don't think so.
I think we're probably okay, aren't we? I mean,
Thank you very much.
Shall we stop recording first? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Where am I? Hang on. Well, oh, okay.